Brandon Sanderson, one of the most famous authors of our time, announced via a surprise video that he had written 4 books, and those books were going to be released over 1 year, 1 book a quarter. People would basically be able to set their pre-orders to fund the creation of those books, as well as a bunch of other swag bag type goodies. Within days, the Kickstarter became the biggest Kickstarter of all time, and immediately people began speculating and celebrating that Brandon Sanderson had changed the publishing industry. And I really don't think it's all that accurate at all, and I would like to just discuss some different things around the Brandon Sanderson Kickstarter. And this is not meant to disparage Brandon Sanderson or anything that he's done. I am a huge Brandon Sanderson fan. I state him as my favorite author. I'm extremely excited for these books, and I mentioned in a previous video that I even supported the Kickstarter. But I think that if we look at this topic in the greater context of the world, what Brandon Sanderson did isn't as special as people think that it is, and is not repeatable by anyone on any major scale, at least in the way that it's going to shift the entire industry in any significant way. That's my prediction. I could be wrong. I do think this might be the minority opinion in the bookosphere. Stepping back just a second from the excitement of Brandon Sanderson becoming the most successful Kickstarter of all time, I think we should just discuss what Kickstarter is and how it could be used. Basically, Kickstarter is one of the biggest and most popular movements forward in the realm of crowdfunding, and basically it allows anyone to set up the idea of a project that you can have people fund, and in theory, people will be able to get rewards from funding that project if it makes enough money to go forward. Kickstarter's been around for a while, and lots of things from games to technology to now books, I guess, music. These things have all been explored in the realm of Kickstarter. And I'm no industry expert or anything, but when you're investing in something on Kickstarter, the key is to think that what you're investing in is going to be worth it. Either the pitch has to be so good, or you have to have enough trust in the person running the Kickstarter campaign that you have to be willing to put forward the money ahead of time to get the thing that you want. In the past, there's been quite a few instances where people had a Kickstarter campaign, it made money, and then those people just sort of ran away, either publicly or privately, with the money, and people were left in a lurch because they were basically conned out of their money. Sometimes you see Kickstarter projects that are too good to be true. In many cases, as your grandpa probably told you, they might be. So to get somebody really interested in giving to a Kickstarter campaign, you either have to have a killer pitch or be someone who is trusted to be able to deliver what you're offering. In combination with that, the money that you're asking for needs to be an amount of money equal to the trust or hype of what you've offered. If you're not offering something very cool, people are not willing to give you very much money, especially if they have no assurance that you're going to be able to deliver the product that you have claimed that you can deliver. It makes sense that the less money that you're asking for, the more likely someone will be able to part with that money on less of a promise or less assurance. This just seems like basic logic. If a small band that you like is asking $15 for each person so that they can make an album, $15 may not feel like that much to be able to contribute to something that you really care about in the state of things. You can afford to spend $15. And if you end up losing that $15, you probably forgot about it in the month that it takes for that to happen, depending on how much disposable income you have. One of the more interesting and wild parts about the Brandon Sanderson Kickstarter is that you can get all 4 books included in the big celebratory announcement for $40, but the vast majority of Kickstarter backers gave significantly more than the required $40 to get the products. Somewhere around 15% of all backers gave $500 or more for a product that only required you $40 to get the 4 books that everyone seems to be hype about. This includes getting a better version of the hardcover, this includes getting the swag bag stuff, etc., but none of that stuff is really known quantities at this point. In no way do I think these are repeatable numbers for the vast majority of published authors, not to mention self-published authors. I mean, Fandom's gonna fandom, yes. I think there are authors that if they chose to go this route in the future, of course they could drum up some serious money. N.K. Jemisin, Jim Butcher, honestly, a lot of the super big name authors that we think of as being huge in BookTube, I don't even think they'd be able to raise anywhere near this amount of money. And I think it's because sometimes as book people, we have a warped perception of our own reality. Moving on from the Kickstarter specifically, let's talk about how popular books are. Anecdotally, how many of your friends in real life do you know that read fiction on any significant basis? Or nonfiction, I guess. Nonfiction books are books too. There are statistics all over the internet about how few people actually read, how many books people actually read a year. When you're talking about a fantasy author, you're talking about a subset of a subset of a subset of a group of people, and these are the fandom. And the fandom may be strong. And in the book community, there may be a ton of people talking about a specific book, but how many people does that equate to in the greater scale, the real big totality of the human experience? Right now, the Kickstarter backing numbers are somewhere around 110,000 people backing this for one of the biggest authors in existence. And it raised this amount of money with most of those backers, the vast majority of backers, giving significantly more than they even needed to get extra stuff from an author who's extremely consistent on delivering not only the content that he's promised his readers, but additional content. He's done stuff like this before, just not in this crazy quantity. So you have one of the most consistently performing authors, you have one of the most charismatic personalities, you have one of the biggest fandoms and most dedicated fandoms for books, all in the perfect storm to create the Brandon Sanderson Kickstarter situation. I really don't think this is that repeatable, and I think it is more of an anomaly. Yes, it is a really cool anomaly, but an anomaly nonetheless. When it comes to the idea of people self-publishing books on Kickstarter, ideas are a dime a dozen, and I don't mean this to be disparaging, but if you've ever hung around the book community very much at all, and you've talked to indie authors, you've talked to people who want to be indie authors, and you hang around with people that enjoy writing in Discord, there are so many interesting ideas for books. So many of them may not come to fruition, so many of the ideas may not be executed super well, and so many of these ideas would get rejected from traditional publishers because of inexperience, because of the idea not being as original as people think. Ideas are cool, but if regular people were trying to fund an idea on Kickstarter and they say, I have this idea for a book, please give me $10 to write it, it's gonna be, one, a lot harder to even get the $10 from enough people to gather the money, and two, how many people are really going to show up in large numbers to give to an unknown quantity from an author who hasn't been able to produce anything thus far? I don't mean to be mean, that's just the reality of the situation. Heck, even if you're a big author, you may not want to commit to something like this, and if you did commit to it, well, maybe you wouldn't be able to deliver. Let's talk about some of the elephant in the room authors like a Patrick Rothfuss or a George R.R. Martin. These are both authors that had huge critical praise. They have huge dedicated fan bases. What if they had done a Kickstarter for one of their books, and they are notoriously known for deadline issues? Some of them just aren't working on things. You'd be like, well, if they had to work on it, they would have finished it, but would the quality have been there? Would have been something that's super successful? When it comes to writing books, it seems to be somewhat the same and somewhat different than other artistic mediums. It takes a ton of work, and you have to be very focused and committed to the work. You can have writer's block pop up, you can have family trauma pop up, and these are things that just really can mess with deadlines, and deadlines are what Kickstarter's based on, because otherwise you seem like you're scamming people out of your money. And think about it, people are mad that Rothfuss hasn't written Doors of Stone yet. They're not the publisher who has a deal to publish this book, and we're counting on that book to make the money. Can you imagine when people give to a Kickstarter and the fandom is so hardcore and dedicated, like for instance the Kingkiller Chronicle fandom, and then the author doesn't deliver and they've already given their money forward to it and the author has received that money? These are the things that have happened in previous Kickstarters, but maybe people aren't familiar with the Kickstarter arena to know about these sort of pitfalls. I do think it's interesting to look at the insular levels of different communities and realize how much they don't understand about the circles outside of their own. While Brandon Sanderson's Kickstarter is the biggest Kickstarter of all time, and that's a really cool thing, congrats to Brandon, what Brandon has really done is just capitalized on the importance of influencer personality-led cult followings, I guess. For like over 10 years now, influencer culture has been a thing, and people being able to keep up with celebrities and celebrities using their personal life in conjunction with the work that they're doing to build a bigger fan base has been a thing, and it's just now that it seems like fantasy book people are really getting with the program with something that's been around for a long time. Brandon Sanderson is really doing that. It just seems like only last year that he really got into the idea of having book influencers really push a lot of his culture. It seemed like free marketing that no one was taking advantage of for years in the book sphere. It seems like YA book publishing actually was way ahead of the curve on that, with being able to get books to influencers to use that as marketing, to drum up fandoms, to turn that into money. I feel like adult fantasy authors are really just behind the trend on on that. I don't know if it was intentional or not intentional, but Brandon Sanderson kills it. He has a podcast, he does Q&As, he does all kinds of fan-focused stuff to turn his celebrity, his fandom into greater fans that adore him more. He puts out books so often and so consistently in ways that people seem to continue loving his books. He has a consistency that nobody else can deliver, and his personality is a huge part of that, and I feel like we need to talk about that as well. In real life, not everybody is good at everything. If somebody wants to self-publish a book, they need to do every aspect or be involved with every aspect of publishing a book. If there's something that they don't know, they need to either learn it or hire it out. Hiring it out requires more money. Learning it requires more time. And there's no guarantee that learning it will mean that you learn it well. And there's no guarantee that if you pay someone for it, you pay the right amount to get the right work, or sometimes you just get screwed over. You only have so much money and you only have so much time. And I feel like that's one of the difficulties of self-publishing. Only when you kickstart it, you become beholden to massive crowds of people that could either be your biggest fans or your worst enemies, or both at the same time. But for you to hold a Kickstarter campaign as an author, you need to be banking on some combination of your previously published work, your being able to convince people of your future work, and or your just charismatic personality. I think as book people, we all need to be honest and just think about our ability to be charismatic influencers online. When you think about the most charismatic people who are able to convince people to back them in a cause, the people that are going to be able to be popular in society for one reason or another, do you think of readers? Do you think of writers of science fiction or fantasy? How many interviews with different authors have you watched and realized that a lot of these people don't have the sort of influencer mindset or social skills that the average influencer for other products has? It's not really that big of a diss. These are my people. These are my friends. These are my family. But think about it. How many of your favorite authors can do the amount of work that Brandon Sanderson does when it comes to being forward-facing and talking to people and still being able to deliver books? Maybe more importantly, how many authors do you know that want this to be part of their job? How many authors like to do public press junkets? A ton of them are public about not wanting to do that work. They became authors because they want to write books. They didn't become authors because they want to be celebrities in the traditional sense. While it's true that the barrier for self-publishing has gotten so much lower, thus there are more people trying to publish their own books, more people writing books and trying to get their name out there, it always helps to have any advantage or to be able to draw people in a specific or unique way. Being able to have these public speaking skills or personality skills online, social media skills, those are super useful. But how many people want to do that work? How many people need to do that work? I think these are all interesting questions, and I don't think every author is capable of doing with their fandoms what Sanderson has done with his. How many people care what all these authors have to say about all these other topics? How many of these authors care to give their opinion on all of these topics? It's an interesting thing to consider. I think that if you want to be the biggest author in the world, you might want to take Daniel Green's advice and have to dive wholeheartedly into this publicity influencer game the way that Brandon is, the way that Daniel sort of is. But I really don't think a lot of people want that, and I don't think that the market is going to only cater to that. The benefits of traditional publishing have always been that they do a lot of the work for you. They give you an advance in the way that you don't get when you're self-publishing, and they will do a lot of marketing for you and will be able to push your book on people that are most likely to read it. You see, that's why like marketing groups exist. That's why we have target demographics. If they think they can sell your book to a specific set of people because they're familiar with that set of people wants, they'll buy your book and they'll be able to push it to those people. And then if it blows up, you can start building some of that name for yourself if you want to. But in the vast sea of everyone being able to publish books at the same time, there's so many books that come out all the time, so many books, my TBR is so high. Traditional publishers can give you a leg up with marketing, with getting your name out there, with potentially getting a cooler cover than you might be able to afford on your own, depending on how much money you want to spend, XYZ. Traditional publishers aren't going anywhere. It's nice to have somebody curate some of that stuff for us. It's nice to have people tell us what we want to read. Yes, it's super cool when you come across something organically, but in the sea of books that are constantly coming out every day, sometimes it's nice to have somebody, even if it's a publisher, say, you like this type of book, here's a book you might like. Yeah, sometimes they get it wrong. Sometimes they do the thing where they say, this is the next Game of Thrones, and it has nothing to do with Game of Thrones. I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't think Brandon Sanderson has done any major changes. He's more of a symptom than a cause of where things are going. And I think it has to do with the greater internet more than just book publishing. It's the idea that people are drawn to influencers and celebrities and charismatic personalities just like they have been throughout the totality of time. It almost feels like books are now just getting with the program and they're sort of lagging behind the rest of society instead of like, this is a big thing that's pushing everything forward. I really think it helps to look at everything in the broader context of everything that isn't just the science fantasy fiction booktube booksphere world. And yeah, it's less exciting to think about it that way, but I think it sets us up for more reasonable predictions. At one point, I made a statement that I thought this successful Kickstarter might help in Brandon Sanderson being able to score an adaptation better, like more people might be willing to put more money into adapting one of his properties. But the more I think about it, the less I think that this actually even supports that argument. When you look at the people that have backed this Kickstarter, it's 110,000 people. Does 110,000 people going to see a movie or a TV show actually make that big of a dent in anything? Especially when movie tickets are $15. Heck, video games are only $60. If 110,000 people bought a game as $60, that's only $6.6 million, which is not that much for a game budget, really. It's definitely not that much for a movie or a show budget, considering the numbers that we saw for Wheel of Time or the upcoming Lord of the Rings show. In my previous video where I talked about adaptations, I mentioned the fact that adaptations are not meant for the fans of something. They're meant to attract people that are not already fans of something. So yeah, if only 110,000 people are fans of Stormlight, an adaptation has the ability to gather in more people than that. But I think really this Kickstarter just shows the excitement of the fans that are already there. It doesn't necessarily prove something about people potentially becoming fans of a new thing. The Way of Kings, I think, has sold 1 million copies. How many of those copies were to the same people buying it in different versions? I don't have the special edition of The Way of Kings, but I've bought the audiobook, the physical book, the regular hardcover version, and the Kindle version. So I have 3 copies of The Way of Kings myself. So if The Way of Kings sold 1 million copies, how many people would really care about adaptation? It's hard to know. Depends on how good it ends up being and how well they're able to draw new crowds. But I think that when you realize the size of the fandom more than the passion of the fandom, you realize that yes, people that love Sando. Yes, when it comes to books, he's extremely popular. But is Brandon Sanderson at this point even a household name for the average person that's not a nerd? Everybody knows George R.R. Martin's name now. Could an adaptation do it? Yeah. Do you think the average non-reading person knows who Brandon Sanderson is even after this Kickstarter? Maybe they saw an article. Maybe not. There's a lot of other things going on in the world right now. I don't mean to be a downer. I just think that it's worth considering these things. Am I freaking excited for the Kickstarter? Yeah, go check out the video that I made of the preview chapters of the first book that we're getting. I am so hype. I'm so excited. I love Brandon Sanderson books. I can't wait to hear more about the secret book projects. I can't wait for the new Miss Point Era 2 book. I can't wait for Stormlight 5 through 10. Yeah, I'm excited, but I don't want to pee in your ear and call it warm rain when it comes to how much of an impact I think he's really making in the greater society as a whole. I want to say that his Kickstarter announcement video got 1 million views. That's barely even viral today. Did he change that much for the book industry? I don't think so. Did he change that much in the global scale of commerce? I don't think so. Did he change a lot in a Sanderson fan's heart? 1000%. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please give it a like. If you want to see more videos from me in the future, including me talking about the Brandon Sanderson news as it continues to unfold, as well as the other books that I'm reading, please subscribe. You'll get notified every time I post a new one. If you've made it to the end of this video, please post a score rating for me down below on a scale from 1 to 10 on how much of a killjoy that I am. Thank you so much for watching. Leave your thoughts on this topic in the comments down below, or join the Discord, which is linked down below, and come yell at me over there. I love you so much. Journey before destination. See you next time.
Sleep, no one ever get enough. Always looking out tired. Sleep, no one ever get enough. If I don't show up, I might get fired. Sleep, no one ever get enough. Always looking out tired. Sleep, no one ever get enough. If I don't show up, I might get fired.